Okay, good afternoon, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Jade Ward. I'm the Director of Aboriginal Strategy, Coordination and Evaluation. I'm a Wiradjuri woman born and raised on Gadigal country in Sydney. I warmly welcome all the webinar participants that we have with us today, in particular frontline staff from the DCJ districts and our not-for-profit partners and any carers on the line. Today, Sydney University and their research partners will discuss some recently completed action research that has resulted in videos and other resources to improve cultural connections for Aboriginal children in care. Before I introduce the speakers and talk about this research further, I would like to pass over to the Associate Professor Lynette Riley, who will do an acknowledgement of country. Thanks, Lynette.
Marang Nangari, Meng Wilayga Wiradjuri. Marang Nangari, Meng Wilayga Wathari. Meng Wilayga Wathari. Meng Wilayga Withari. Meng Wilayga Wathari. Marang Nangari. Marang Nangari. Good afternoon, everybody. Despite the technical difficulties, my name's Lynette Riley. I'm a Wiradjuri and Gamilaroi person from Western and Northwestern New South Wales. I take this opportunity to acknowledge my elders and thank them for all that they've done, and acknowledge that today I am on the lands of the people of the Eora Nation, and I thank them for all that they have done, because for me they've borne the brunt of colonisation and done so much that the rest of us could survive. If you would like to just put in the chat which country you're on today as part of the acknowledgement process. Thank you.
So we know that strong connections to family, culture and community and country are foundational to the lifelong wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. For children in out-of-home care, their caseworkers and carers are critical to supporting children in care to have positive relationships with their families and culture. Sometimes, though, you may not be sure how to best do this work or how you can improve these practices, and this is what we will be discussing today. As a bit of background, the Fostering Lifelong Connections is an action research study that explores how caseworkers can support positive relationships for children with their families and culture. Associate Professor Amy Conley-Wright will provide an overview of the Fostering Lifelong Connections research to start this webinar. The Cultural Connections videos being showcased today is the result of a very productive partnership with the Research Centre for Children and Families that has leveraged the skills and knowledge of our Aboriginal caseworkers, as well as tapping into the knowledge of the child and family staff, Office of the Senior Practitioner, and Aboriginal Strategy, Coordination and Evaluation team. A lot of work has led to today, and I am very proud to have been involved. This webinar will premiere the results of the collaboration, which will include 2 short films produced by Desert P Media and the Research Centre for Children and Families in collaboration with 6 Aboriginal caseworkers from DCJ and Uniting in Dubbo. Just making sure I have audio there, sorry. The films explore the importance of family and cultural connections from a young person's perspective and how caseworkers can be a bridge to connect young people in care with their families and cultures. Sarah Chifchi and Associate Professor Lynette Riley will talk to you about how these videos were developed, and we will screen the 2 short films for you all to see. Following the screening, there will be a discussion reflecting on fostering family and cultural connections with Trudy Everingham and a DCJ Aboriginal caseworker from Dubbo CSC, Stephen Newman. Finally, there will be a short Q&A session after the official presentations. I would encourage you, if you have any comments or further questions, to please feel free to add them in the chat. We thank the FACSIAR and events team for providing the opportunity to showcase this important research in their Lunch and Learn series. I know that every person that has contributed to this work and those who have taken the time to attend has a passion to make a difference, to hear, learn and reflect with the goal of creating strong connections to family, culture, community and country for children in care. With this in mind, let's get started with Associate Professor Amy Conley-Wright up first to provide you with an overview of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much, Jade, for working with our team on the film guide and being part of this webinar today. And thank you to our FACSIAR colleagues for organizing and the other presenters for being part of the webinar and the project. The ARC Fostering Lifelong Connections study is a collaboration among the University of Sydney and 7 NGOs in out-of-home care and DCJ. 2 caseworkers and a caseworker manager per organization are involved with the project as action researchers per project site, with DCJ operating across all 4 project sites. The project operates in 4 locations: Dubbo, where we work with DCJ Dubbo and Uniting Dubbo; Maitland, where we work with DCJ Maitland, Catholic Care Hunter Manning, and Wesley Dalmar; Sydney, where we work with DCJ Burwood, Bernardo's and Key Assets; and Wollongong, where we work with DCJ Coniston, Catholic Care Wollongong, and Care South. The research team is composed of myself and Associate Professor Lynette Riley, with Professor Judy Cashmore, Dr. Susan Collings, Sarah Chufchi, Dr. Betty Liu, and Suzanne Pope. We have local as well as international partner investigators, and the project is supported by an expert reference group composed of 6 experts by experience, who are young people who've been in out-of-home care, mothers whose children are in out-of-home care on long-term orders, and carers of children on long-term orders, alongside experts by profession who have expertise in trauma, legal and court processes, and out-of-home care service delivery. Next slide, please. The project aim of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project is to build practice knowledge about strategies that support connections between children's families and carers when children are in long-term care. We are using an action research model and co-design approaches to develop practices and also to focus on currently utilized practices within organizations to learn about how caseworkers can integrate different strategies into their practice toolkit. We are using these practice learnings to generate resources like tip sheets that will be integrated into a freely available training curriculum for caseworkers at the conclusion of the project. We hope these practices will be used widely throughout the sector. Next slide, please. The project was initiated in February 2020. The project plan involves learning sessions where the caseworkers and caseworker manager, action researchers, and the research team come together to learn about cultural and family connections and to plan the next action research cycle. We've been lucky that despite COVID, we have held 3 learning sessions in the Newcastle Maitland area, in Wollongong, and in Dubbo, and have learned from traditional owners of these lands as part of the learning sessions. Each of the local groups chooses from a menu of practices to decide what to focus on for the next 6 to 9 months. Next slide, please. The project principles and practices we develop are based in trauma awareness, awareness of the trauma that children may experience, as well as their family members in relation to family connections, family time, alongside cultural safety and respect, particularly regard for Aboriginal kinship, and reflective practice, which we use to structure the monthly meeting for the local teams. Next slide, please. This table shows the practices that have been trialed in the project so far. Our focus today is on cultural connections. Last year, we did a webinar with FACSIAR where we shared about family time at a distance practice. Go to the Research Center for Children and Families website for practice resources generated from the project so far, with more to come. I'm pleased to hand over to my colleague, Sarah Chifchi. Sarah is a research associate at the Research Center for Children and Families at the University of Sydney. She is the project coordinator for the Fostering Lifelong Connections study and is completing her PhD on Aboriginal decision-making models in the child protection context. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I just want to check that everyone can hear me and that they can see the slides. Okay, so as Amy mentioned, I'm the project coordinator of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project. To me, that means I get the best job of all, which is to work really closely with all the caseworkers who are participating as action researchers in the project. A part of my role is to meet monthly with the caseworkers in all 4 of the project sites to reflect on one of the areas of practices that was shown on the previous slide in that table. It typically involves caseworkers trying something new in their practice, or trying out some new resources, or just allowing the space and time for bringing a really intentional focus to an area of practice that caseworkers might otherwise find a bit challenging to implement while balancing their day-to-day casework duties. And the aim of this is to learn through the experiences of caseworkers how these practices can be embedded and what obstacles need to be overcome for this to happen. So when the Dubbo team, which is made up of 6 remarkable, extraordinary Aboriginal caseworkers who you will meet shortly, when they decided to focus on practices for supporting Aboriginal children's cultural connections, we very quickly realised that our work together was not about reflecting on trying something new in their practice, or even about bringing an intentional focus to cultural connections. Because as they will tell you, and as you will see in the films, as Aboriginal caseworkers, they are always bringing an intentional focus to supporting Aboriginal children's connections to culture and family. It's their purpose and it's what drives them. So it became a journey of documenting their expertise, what they already do, their ways of being and doing in their dual role as both Aboriginal people and members of their communities, and as caseworkers. So what we did was we met monthly over 6 months to brainstorm how we could share this expertise with the out-of-home care sector. And what emerged from our work together was the idea to develop video resources that could offer caseworkers and other viewers, such as carers or social work students, a transformative learning experience, one that really highlights and drives the message home how vitally important connections to family and culture are for Aboriginal children in care, and importantly to do that from the perspectives of Aboriginal people. So over to the next slide. To achieve this and to honour the experiences of Aboriginal children and young people in care and their families, the caseworkers in Dubbo recommended that we engage Desert Pea Media to produce the video resources. And for those of you who are watching today who don't know about Desert Pea Media's work, they've collaborated extensively with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities across Australia to facilitate community-driven and led storytelling using the mediums of film, song, music, dance and performance. I highly recommend that you look up some of their other projects as well if you get the chance. And a real strength of Desert Pea Media's approach in working with us to produce these films was their unique process called the Real, the Ideal and the Bridge. If we could move to the next slide. So they spent a week in early June in Dubbo alongside the participants in the films, and Associate Professor Lynn Riley and I were also there alongside the participants. And over the first 2 days, the Desert Pea Media team workshopped the vision and storylines of the films with the participants, centred on the real, so as in what the current experience looks like for Aboriginal children, young people and families, what participants envision to be the ideal or best case scenario, or where we want to try to get to, and what the bridge to get us there involves. How can we get to the ideal? And the scripts were developed from the workshop, and the rest of the week was spent filming. And being in early June in Dubbo, it was extremely, extremely cold. So here are some behind the scenes photos of the workshop where we discussed the real, ideal and the bridge. And if we move to the next slide, here's a beautiful behind the scenes shot of 2 of the wonderful caseworkers in the films from DCJ, who are looking at a mural in Dubbo that inspired their approach to connecting a young person they work with back to their family after being disconnected for many, many years. And I'll now hand it over to Associate Professor Lynn Riley to talk to you about some of the members of the local Aboriginal community in Dubbo who were also featured in the films. Thank you.
So if we move to thank you. My involvement is that I'm actually from Dubbo, and so have a lot of cultural and kinship connections. And so in talking to the caseworkers and some of the kinship carers in Dubbo, they were talking about the strengths that the kids get who are in kinship care. And so one of the things that they wanted to do in the videos was emphasise what the strength was of culture. And we didn't want to have a young person who was in kinship care involved in the video work in case we re-traumatised them. So we spoke to some traditional dancers in Dubbo, the Talbrigard dancers led by Lewis Burns. And spoke to them about, well, have you got a young person who'd be willing to be our actor? And that turned out to be young Xavier Wells, who was just amazing in the part. And he felt very honoured to be able to tell the story of a couple of young people whose stories we compiled in this process. And the image you've got here is of the day that we did the filming. As we said, very cold, very wet. And these young people still were out there in their traditional dance doing this work. As you can see, I was very rugged up. Next slide, please. The other person that we were told we needed to make sure we involved was Uncle Ralph Naden, who runs a cultural school at Balladoran. And Uncle Ralph runs these cultural centres. He initially started out in providing a cultural centre for young people who were in juvenile detention centres and care. And he's actually grown this. The land that they've got this built on is actually one of the old reserves that was out at Balladoran, and the family have gradually been buying it up. If you get a chance to go out to Balladoran, his phone number is there. He runs cultural camps, and they're just an amazing experience for everyone. The next slide, please. So we're now going to show you the films that have been made. This is our premiere, our launch of the videos. But in the interest of today, we've actually merged the two videos together to make it easier for you so that we're not stopping and starting them all again. So I'll now hand over to Grace, who's going to show us the two videos which have been merged together, but they are actually two separate videos when you get a chance to look at them. The Bridge, which is the story from the young person of what were the issues for them. And then Building Bridges is the story on behalf of caseworkers, the Aboriginal caseworkers who are giving advice to non-Indigenous caseworkers and others about the best way to incorporate and include kinship and cultural connections for these young people in out-of-home care. Thank you, Grace.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country of all First Nations across Australia and their enduring connections to land, sea and community. Let us remember our elders gone before us to the dream time, for it is their shoulders that we stand upon. Their skies are our earth to continue their work affecting a change that they, our ancestors, pioneered for. We pay respects to our First Nations families and our little people, our children, the ones that never made it home and the ones that are yet to. It is for them that our children, given every opportunity, will be our future leaders of a brighter tomorrow. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which filming took place, the Tabaga people of the Wiradjuri Nation.
I was with my care family since I was a baby. As I grew older, I felt like there was something missing in me. Like I didn't know who I was. But then I just thought that was normal. It's weird because I knew I had another family out there. I wondered if they ever wanted to see me, get to know me. When I asked my care family if I could meet them, they would always say, "We're your family." So I stopped asking. I had lots of different caseworkers over the years. They didn't know me and I didn't know them. A lot of promises were made, but they never happened. I had no trust. One day I had a new caseworker named Trevor. The first time we hung out, we just passed the footy round. He didn't judge me. He just listened. Over time, I really got to know him. He was always there for me when no one else was. He showed me that I didn't have to feel confused, that I should know my roots. where I'm from and who I am. So I asked him about my mob and if I could meet them. He said, "Good idea, bruh. I'll look into it." He found out who they were and where they lived. He showed me photos and set up a phone call. I was nervous, but a good nervous. When I met my aunties, uncles and nana, there was a lot of hugs and tears. I felt right. I began visiting them more often. Uncle showed me culture, tell me dreamtime stories. I even learned how to make and play a ditch. But that circular breathing, that's hard. I love learning culture and dancing with my family. Me, my cousins, my siblings. Because it makes me feel connected and have some sort of togetherness. That knowledge and that love, it gave me strength.
I've had family be a part of that, and it's sad. It shouldn't be.
That hurts my heart. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
I think due to the historical nature of Australia's history and past policies and things like that, I assumed that statistic would be higher.
Your identity is what gets you through from day to day. A part of your identity is absolutely your culture, your community, your family. If you don't have that, you lose yourself, and I've seen that happen to a lot of people.
If they haven't had the connections or made any connections, where do they go? They're lost. They don't feel like they belong where they've been. If you don't know where home is, you've got nothing. If we don't help guide them, how are they supposed to find their way? It's important, helps heal.
So helping them reconnect with their culture and their identity and who they are and where they come from, that's really important for us. We're the ones that fill the gap between the carers and the family. So I think really focusing on that and building those relationships is really important.
That is our number one priority, in keeping kids together with their brothers, their sisters, their mums, their dads. If that can't happen, then they need to be with people who they are familiar with, connected to thrive in out-of-home care.
We got to remember that family is not just always mum and dad. Family could be my brother, my sister, my aunt, my uncle, my grandma, my grandpa. It could be another person within that family that is not blood related, but it's still your aunt, it's still your uncle. So when you listen and you're talking to the kids and you're asking them, who is it that you want to see? It's important to make sure that they have that connection, because that's probably their safe connection. What's important is that you keep that line open so that if they feel unsafe at any time in their life along the way, they know where they can go.
One of my colleagues says you can make phone calls and do all the internet research you want, but you go back out to Brewarrina with a couple of these kids' names, and the first door you knock on, they're going to know who they are and who their family is. It doesn't matter how much work you do in the office, it's nothing compared to actually getting out into the community and talking to the families and the community.
Ask questions. Be curious. Because you don't know if you don't ask. It's conversations with the people who know, to learn about their family, their community, what's important to them, helps you build a relationship so that you know how to interact with that family, how to approach difficult conversations.
One of the other issues we face is some of our carers have had these kids for a long time, and so they've built up a really protective, loving relationship for these kids. And connecting the kids back to their families and their culture and the country where they're from, I know a few of the carers that we have that feel like they're losing the child when that happens. So I think we have to really build a bridge between our carers and the families. Build those relationships up and build that connection, both for the child and the family, but also for the carers as well. It starts with communication. So we have to get the families involved, and we have to get the carers involved and bring them together as one. So we're all one big family around these kids.
When you pause and you listen to the voice of that child, they help you do your job better. They guide you, they remind you what's important, and they will always say their family's important. Find the people that they're yearning to see. That's the biggest thing. But if they don't know where they are, that's your job to find them. To me, that's my most important role, is to connect these children that I work with to who they're missing.
Thanks, Grace. If we can now move back to the slide, there is a guide that's going to go with these, but I'll let Sarah talk about that in a moment. Some of the key themes that we got out of the videos was from the young person that they were feeling that they were lost and that there was something missing and they didn't know who they were. And this is really important because these young people are going to go out of home care by the time they're 18, and they need to have these connections before then so that they have the connections back to their community and their kinship so that they know who they are. The carers saw themselves as a bridge between the caseworkers saw themselves as a bridge between the carers and families, and that for the young person, having those cultural connections was about being connected, and that the knowledge they got from that helped give them love and strength to move forward. I'm also going to now introduce two key players in the development of these videos. If we can move to the next slide, please. We have Trudy and Stephen. Trudy Everingham, who is a proud Wiradjuri woman working for the Department of Communities and Justice in the Central West of Dubbo. She has held positions in the government and non-government sectors and began her working career for Mandurah, an Aboriginal corporation. She has extensive experience in the mental health sector and became a local government councillor in Narromine to advocate for change and better outcomes for local youth. Trudy joined the Department of Communities and Justice to help enhance the lives of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. Stephen Newman is a proud Wiradjuri man who was born and raised in Narromine, New South Wales. Stephen is currently completing a diploma in community services and is a caseworker within the Permanency Support Program at Uniting in Dubbo. Stephen works predominantly with Aboriginal children and young people and acts in a mentor role for both the boys and girls in his caseload, as well as the other clients engaged with Uniting. Stephen feels his most challenging and rewarding work is always with children and young people. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Trudy and Stephen to respond to these three questions. So I might ask Trudy if she would respond to the first question. I'm hoping she's there somewhere. I can't see her.
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you, Trudy. Can you tell us what it was like for you to be part of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been a partnership since February 2020. The thing is, it's about listening to what I've got out of it is like listening to the experiences of other caseworkers from DCJ and the NGOs. We've been able to develop some really good resources from being part of this project, and those resources we've been able to take back to our own teams and share those amongst the office for other caseworkers to be able to use as well. So that's been a really good thing to happen, I guess. sharing my own experiences and my knowledge, things that I've learnt from the families, what has worked for me, what hasn't worked for me. That's been another good thing to share, I guess, with everyone. We've been able to build some really good friendships and networks along the way as well. So, yeah, it's been great.
Thank you, Trudy. Stephen, would you like to share what it's been like for you being part of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project?
Sure. So for me, it was a nice step away from the normal day-to-day casework role, but it was refreshing to know that we aren't isolated in our struggles with keeping Aboriginal children connected to their families and country. Obviously, Trude would know, working with DCJ and anybody else from DCJ or other NGOs, we all have similar challenges, and I think it's quite refreshing to sort of have that knowledge and know that it's not just myself or anybody else at Uniting that are having these issues with connecting children back to country and back to mob. And the other thing is that it's really nice to be a part of a project like this that could potentially go on to influence policy and procedure. I don't think I really sort of sat back and thought about it through the process, but looking at it now, this is something that could go on to change a lot of stuff, not just in New South Wales, but across Australia as well. So that's really important.
Thank you. Trudy, I might come back to you. What were the main messages you hope to get across in the videos?
I guess listen to the kids. You know, we're working with the kids. Listen to their stories. Listen to the challenges that they are having, because it's their journeys, not ours. If we listen to them, like I said before, they'll help us do our job because they tell us what they're missing. So I guess the main message is, you know, take your time, build that relationship with that child and learn what they want, learn what they need the most, and they'll help you guide the way with you.
Trudy, we were really lucky in that one of the cases that we used for this video on the young person came from a young person that you have been mentoring. Do you think that her message is clearly reflected in the videos?
I believe everyone would have been moved by the videos, especially the child's video. Like every time I see it, I just get goosebumps. It takes me back to those conversations that I had with her, you know, and him around those, what was it that they really wanted? What made them feel lost? And it was that they weren't connected. They weren't connected to country, they weren't connected to family, they weren't connected to anyone, and no one listened. And that's all they wanted, was someone to listen and take them home, you know. So then it was up to me to find out what was the best way to do that.
And to learn how to use the proper protocols in taking them back to country.
Yeah,
Stephen, sorry.
Yeah, because like when we went through that process, it was a matter of listening and talking to other people. And like Steve said before, like it's all your mainly works out of the office, knocking on doors, asking questions. It's not behind a screen. So yeah.
Thank you. Stephen, what were the main messages you hope to get across in the videos?
I think I just wanted to highlight just how important it is for Aboriginal children in care to be connected to country and to family. Because for all of the kids that we work with, they've been through so much trauma and grief in their young lives. And without having that connection to family and culture, there's no stopping that. It just builds and builds through the rest of their life. So taking these sort of small steps by getting out into the community and making phone calls and asking questions, it's small steps that sort of really help guide the rest of their big journey. So I just wanted to sort of help get that message across of just how important it is for children to be connected to their family.
Thank you. So if as a caseworker, Stephen, If there was one thing that you could do tomorrow to help foster cultural connections, what would you suggest?
For me, I think the very first step is just take the time and sit down with the kids and ask what they want. They know who they want to be a part of their lives. Sorry. They know who they want to be a part of their network for life. And if we don't take the time and sit down and ask those questions, we're not going to be able to help build that relationship. So I think the very first step is just asking the questions from the kids.
Making them the priority.
That's right, yeah.
Trudy, what would be the one message that you would like to give in helping to foster cultural connections?
I guess, we're always working flat out. Slow it down. If you slow it down, you'll find those connections. You'll find meaningful connections as well. Yeah, that'll be my biggest thing. Slow it down, get your leaders on board, find out who knows who. We all know someone, we're connected in one way or another. So, if you slow that process down, have those conversations, you'll help find the way for that child and those families.
Thank you, both of you. I know that this project came about from the ideas and thoughts of the caseworkers in Dubbo, and it is your work that has inspired us to create these videos. So thank you very much for being engaged and involved in this whole process. I'll move to the next slide now and just say that one of the key things we asked out the caseworkers was advice for non-Aboriginal caseworkers. And the three key things that they said was that they need to be respectfully curious, ask questions, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Listen to the voice of the child and ask the child who they want to see, who they are missing and yearning to connect with. And get out into the community and talk with families. They know what's important to them and they will assist in the process of appropriate cultural protocols to moving and working with those families and supporting the young people in their connections to their culture and kinship. Thank you very much to those caseworkers, and I'll now hand over to Sarah, who's going to take you through the guide. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks, Trudy and Stephen. It's been so amazing to work with you both and other members of the Dubbo team. We really hope that the films have resonated with you and that you encourage your colleagues to watch them. If you're interested in reflecting on your own practice in relation to supporting Aboriginal children's connections to family and culture, we've developed a viewing guide for caseworkers and social work students that highlights key themes of the films and provides reflective questions and activities to develop practice. A special thanks to our social work placement students, Tilly, Jess and Karen, for assisting our research team to develop this guide. And we also want to acknowledge DCJ's Aboriginal Strategy, Coordination and Evaluation team and the Office of the Senior Practitioner for their vital contributions and input into the viewing guide. I'll give you a preview of the guide really quickly, but first, if we move to the next slide, here are some important contacts and links. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email our research centre or you can visit our research centre's website. Lots of resources we've developed are featured on our website as well, and as well as the Fostering Lifelong Connections project website. Contact information for the Taubraga Wiradjuri dancers and Uncle Ralph Naden can also be found here on this slide. And all the links and resources will be made available on a post-webinar website hosted by DCJ. So if we now open up the PDF of the viewing guide, I can quickly just show you what it looks like. So you can see that this guide has been developed specifically for caseworkers and social work students, though we are planning on developing a similar guide targeted towards carers. And if we move to the contents page, you'll see that there's a brief introduction to the viewing guide, and then it's split into two sections following the two videos. So if we click on the bridge, a young person's perspective, You'll see here that we've got a bit of discussion around the theme of identity and belonging, followed by some reflection questions and activities that you could do in your workplace, either individually or as a team. And I'll leave it there for you to explore on your own. We'll provide the link to this viewing guide. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'll now hand it back over to Jade Ward, who will moderate a Q&A for us.
Thank you, Sarah. So thanks, everybody. I'm just having a look in the chat, and there are some questions that have come up. So I'll just have a look at those. So are there any key policy procedural changes you'd like to see this project inform? Annie Lynn or Amy, happy to answer that.
I think just as a general one, I think we want to see more practice and more focus on children's connections, because it's a lot easier when those connections are maintained rather than going back later and trying to reestablish those connections when children are older. So how do we maintain those connections if children enter care, keep those relationships strong between children's carers, their families, and that's the way that they connect to their culture.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Annie Lynn, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, each of the projects has been coming up with just even small changes. Sometimes really small changes have huge impact. So it's really hard to look at the whole system and make a big change. It won't happen. So what we're doing is looking at what are the small changes that can have huge impact and that can lead to other changes down the track.
Thank you. And do you have RTC protocol that can be shared?
So it's an action research study. It's not a randomized control trial, but we do have information on the study and the approach that we're taking on our project website, which we posted into the chat.
Thank you. And Pam also just said that this should inform Aboriginal child placement principles. Any policy should always be reviewed and updated. A comment there. Has anybody, from what I can see, there are no more questions in the chat. Oh, there's one. Was this done with the Aboriginal Child Management policy, the ACMP?
No, it was just done with the partners, with DCJ, Uniting, and
yeah. Yeah, so, and maybe I can just add to that, when we worked with Amy and Annie Lynn across this, obviously the ACMP principles were always at play. So we're always at the forefront of our work that we do is always about Aboriginal voice and family-led decision making, self-determination for Aboriginal people. So certainly, you know, the ACMP, you know, as Aboriginal people, we know that the ACMP, if implemented authentically, that will transform our Aboriginal families' lives. So certainly that, you know, what Annie and Amy are doing here is all about that self-determination for Aboriginal people. So it does align really lovely. I'm just going to see, I think, any more questions? There's one here. I'm interested specifically in advice for children of stolen generations who don't have confirmation of their culture or mob, and their parents and grandparents who have not had connection with culture. Did you want to make any comment to that one, Annie Lynn? Or?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been doing is working with Link Up and working out ways in which we can create better connections for those children who've been taken away and who don't know their connections because they haven't been taught from a young child. So there are ways that you can do that, but it needs a greater engagement across the whole community. And we're getting some lessons from the caseworkers as well, who've been actively involved in doing this, in helping to track down families so that the kids have those connections. It can be done, but it may take a little bit longer. I don't know if Trudy or Stephen want to give examples of things that they do as part of their practice.
I guess one of the things that we do is, you know, we get together and we ask those questions with, you know, does someone know this family? Along the way, like we've been lucky enough to be able to find that we do, or someone knows someone, which is really good. Yeah, that's pretty much what we do. don't know, that's probably the same.
I think I'm lucky in the regard that so I'm from Narromine. One of our other caseworkers is from Burke. Another one's here from Dubbo. So we've got a bit of community knowledge, and it's sometimes it's as small as just a surname, and it just sort of pricks a bit of a reminder in you that sort of when you might know somebody that knows that person. So we're able to sort of reconnect families that way.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Trudy. And I suppose, for me and all our Aboriginal kids, identity is everything. So, identifying as Aboriginal isn't about the colour of your skin or the colour of your hair or the colour of your eyes. It isn't about how you look. It's a connection to people, places and things. And it's about something that is unseen, that is deep inside of you. And that is just so important to our kids in making sure that we connect them to those things. So such an important piece of work that we need to remember. So thank you. Can we share the videos and viewing guide with carers from Gemma? With carers.
Absolutely. And there will be a care specific guide to come by the end of November. It'll be released in the same location. Yeah, we're working on that now.
Fantastic. Yeah, great resources.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Jade.
Sarah.
Also a question, do you have advice for working with young people who are saying they do not have an interest in learning about their Aboriginal culture or to be connected to their family? I think this is something we've talked about with Trudy and Stephen, so it'd be great to hear from them about this question.
I guess
Okay.
I'd be curious to I'd be asking them, why don't you want to know? Like I would want to know why they don't want to know, and dig a little bit deeper there. Is it what's under? There's got to be something why they don't like, or is there something that they've learnt that they don't like, and slowly introduce the positive things that they need to see and learn. Maybe there's been a negative experience. I'd just be curious about asking why not.
Yeah, and that's pretty. Sorry, go Steve.
Sorry.
Yep.
I was just going to say I haven't come across that yet in my role, but yeah, I think it's just a little bit of exploration. For some of our kids in care, they may not have had exposure to too much of a cultural influence. So yeah, just taking little small steps, and like Trude said, just introducing a little bit at a time, and just trying to sort of work with them as to what sort of might be driving that feeling.
And you can say that, and this is the experience in my family too. When you had to claim an exemption to say that you weren't Aboriginal so that you weren't removed and that you had to integrate into society, there was a lot of negativity associated with actually saying you were Aboriginal. So now we're trying to flip that and celebrate being Aboriginal and tell people, it is a celebration. We are resilient. We are, we're deadly. Our culture is beautiful. And trying to flip that whole negative connotation is a huge milestone for us. So, there's a lot of shame factor with some people in actually acknowledging and recognising their Aboriginality. And we've got to start having those conversations and looking at the strengths and the richness of culture rather than all that negative stuff that was imposed on Aboriginal people from government policy. So it's shifting the mindset and actually looking at all the strengths of Aboriginal culture and exposing our generations to that. So, yeah. Did anybody else have any other questions that they wanted to ask before we wrap up? Okay, so Amber's just made a comment, just because someone doesn't want to identify or know right or know right now does mean we shouldn't be exploring, gathering, and holding the information for when they are ready. Doesn't, yeah. So yeah, Amber, such an important point, and that's our job and our role in the department to make sure that just because the child doesn't want to identify with their Aboriginality now, it doesn't mean that we don't have all that information there for them when they want to explore that. because as we said before, identity is just such a significant thing for everybody, regardless of where you are and who you're from. You know, everybody needs to know who they are. So, so I just want to, in wrapping up today's FACSIAR Lunch and Learn, I know we had some technical issues and some people have had to go, but I just want to acknowledge and thank all of our guest speakers, including Associate Professor Annie Lynette Riley, Associate Professor Amy Conley-Wright, Sarah Chipchey, Trudy Everingham, Stephen Newman and Grace Duggan for all your work and the FACSIAR team. I'd like to thank Desert Pea Media and the Research Centre for Children and Families, the Dubbo DCJ workers and the entire Dubbo community who have supported and been involved in the research project. Thank you, FACSIAR, for organising, facilitating the Lunch and Learn. So the link to the next Lunch and Learn will be provided in the chat. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to everybody who attended and contributed today to this rich discussion. Your participation is obviously pivotal in making these things happen. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending, and we will see you at the next Lunch and Learn.